Today, this special podcast with the WUN team is exploring International Women's Day and the theme for this year, which is Accelerate Action. So today I have with me Kerris Mackley, Gill Edwards and Jo Butlin. Can I start, ladies, by asking you to introduce yourself for our audience here today?
I'll kick off. So yes, Kerris Mackley. I've been a WUN advocate now for coming up to 5 years. Very lucky to spend 5 wonderful years with WUN. And for my day job, I'm a senior consultant at Kerris Consulting.
My name's Gill Edwards. I've been an advocate for WUN for the last 2 and a bit years, and my day job I work for Scoob as a senior project manager.
Hi, I'm Jo Butlin. I'm one of the founders, along with Hayley, of WUN, and in my day job, I don't have a single day job. I have multiple. I'm very privileged to have multiple non-executive roles, all in the energy industry, all focused on net zero and the transition to it.
Thank you. And thanks all for coming today. So today's special podcast is focused on Accelerate Action, which is the theme for International Women's Day. And I thought I'd kick us off by quoting something from the World Economic Forum, which says, at the current rate at which we're seeing change in terms of gender parity, it's going to take until 2158, so approximately 5 generations, for us to achieve gender parity. Hence the need potentially to accelerate action. So any thoughts on that first, the length of time that's going to take?
I would say I don't think any of us would be terribly surprised by that from the lived experience. I'm going to build on statistics. Another statistic is from the work that EU Skills has done, which shows that actually in the energy sector or in the utility sector, women only represent 29% of the workforce against a national average of 48% of the workforce. So we've got a challenge in the international world. We've got a significant challenge in the utility space as well. Why am I not surprised? I think because we are doing lots of things and we're talking about parity and equity and equality a lot. But actually, fundamentally, we're not changing how we're behaving and we're not changing the way we work. And so, therefore, we're still working in an environment that is very much driven by history and the way that men expect to work.
I think we all probably, I said, not surprised that that's the figure, unfortunately. But it's also assuming that we don't decelerate. I think obviously when times are hard, changes in D&I agendas, things can get difficult. And I think, to Jo's point, it's really hard fighting that tradition and fighting that culture that's existing. It's not easy, otherwise we would have done it. So in the spirit of accelerating action, there's maybe not necessarily a right answer, but it's difficult. And assuming that we keep our current pace, and I think obviously there's been great leaps, but there's still so much more to do. And to keep that pace for 5 generations is going to be an absolute task, I think.
It is, definitely.
And it's got to be faster than 5 generations.
It's got to be faster. It's got to be faster because none of us will be here in 5 generations.
Nor our children, nor our grandchildren.
Yeah. So exactly. It's quite depressing, I guess, when you've a woman in midlife and you think that you've come this far and actually there's still so much further to go. I know talking to colleagues and friends, they often say, we want it to be better for our daughters. But actually, all sons and daughters came from a woman who's presumably your wife or girlfriend or the mother of your children. So challenge yourselves to want it to be better now. Let's stop waiting. We don't have to wait. Let's really put some accelerated action in place to make it sooner than 5 generations. Hopefully just 5 years would be good, but
be a suitable timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to see that acceleration, don't you? Men and women often bring different leadership styles, different attitudes, different backgrounds, different beliefs into the workplace. So how do we bring them into the discussion and bring them into helping that action to make a difference? Because it has to be everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah. This is a point that's really come to the fore through the work we've done with WUN. Because actually, when you talk to most people in work, they actually believe that equality is the right thing to do. They recognise that decisions are better if men and women are involved. That they can see the benefits, but we're not making the progress. And I think it is really this point of we think in different ways, we behave in different ways, but the traditional mould, and the mould that probably still prevails, is, because of history, very, very much a sort of a male way of thinking and a male way of behaving. And so actually what we're needing to do is not just women to be challenging that norm, but also men to be reflecting and thinking about how they change as well. So we meet in the middle. I was thinking about this as driving down here today and thinking, actually, when you look at men and women getting married, living together, doing whatever they do, there's compromise on both sides, and both bring strengths to the party, also challenges, but actually it's the combined force that really creates power. But always there is compromise. There is always compromise on both sides, and I think that's one of the big challenges of how do we get compromise on both sides.
And how do we get that representative voice? So we know from the sector that the more senior you get, the more male dominated it is. And therefore they are the key decision makers in how businesses operate, and sort of they set the tone for the culture. So how are we going to change that groupthink and make a difference? Is it role models? Is it them taking different action? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear from both you guys from different age group experiences as well, because I certainly know that my daughter's view on the world is different to my view on the world.
I think one of the things we all need to really look at is, why do there become fewer women as they go through their life? What is it in the workplace that is making women drop out? So women will leave to have children and a family, but then come back and, both parents are perfectly capable of looking after a child, at any time in their life. So what is it that women are leaving for? Why don't they want to carry on their career, and why aren't they elevating themselves up through the ranks? I think that's really key. And then I think, businesses, sectors, they need to look at how are they making themselves attractive to women of every age. Women aren't a monolith. There's not just one thing happening to women at each time. There's women at intersections all the way through their lives. So I guess it's things like, are you a mother? Are you a carer of an elderly person? Are you going through health difficulties of your own? All the challenges that life brings, we need to be looking at how we do that. But I think if we don't improve the lot of women in business, that they're just going to vote with their feet, and they'll be off to a company that does embrace equity and, does give an equal chance to everybody.
What will make you stay in the workplace then, Kerris? So you're from our advocate community, you're more earlier in your career. What's going to make you stay in the workplace? What are you looking for?
So for me, it does come back to culture. And my personal motto, and I think the motto that really helps me in this space, is be generous. I've had the absolute pleasure, Hayley, Jo, you've been definitely one of them, of people who have, women, men, allies, all these people who have fundamentally defined my early career, which has led me to the position I'm in now, which I'm very happy with. And I think being generous with your time, supporting people, supporting women, I think we often underestimate the power of network and the power that we can make by just supporting one person. Even if you spend 20 minutes in a room, so I take on kind of graduate mentors, even if I spend 20 minutes in the room with them once a week, the changes that you can see and how they have the space then to grow and to continue to grow, then that culture has to cascade into a much broader sense and a much bigger sense, and that then takes over businesses and organisations, and that's the culture that keeps people there and keeps people moving forward. To your point as well, Gill, as well, is keeps people moving towards those senior positions. I mean, if you look at, let's look at investment and funding for businesses and for new startups, is that so heavily dominated by male-led businesses. So I think that starting small and cascading that culture to the point where you see these fundamental organisations changing and these structures changing is what will keep women in business, and also keeps me in roles as well.
Building on that, in terms of the workplace, the culture, and the topic here about accelerating action. So it's not about doing what we've been doing, because as you quite rightly say, we could go backwards if we just keep doing what we're doing, but accelerating and doing more. McKinsey's Women in the Workplace 2024 report states that companies have scaled back programs designed to advance women in the workplace. And companies are reporting a decline in career development, mentorship and sponsorship programs geared towards women, as well as recruiting internship programs. if there's a definitive decision to reduce spend in that space, how are we possibly going to accelerate action?
It's not the exact be generous that I just talked about, is it? I don't think. No. It's kind of not the way we're going, I think, unfortunately. So I think it comes back down to companies, businesses and people having an understanding of how much DE&I can bring to your organisation financially. We talked about group thinking, making better decisions, really driving the business forward. And it's been proven again and again that having a team that is diverse is better for your business. And I think we really need to focus on that sell and consequently how we can then re-justify the investment in these programmes. When things are hard and difficult, oftentimes if companies have got, let's say, a legacy box ticking program and that's what they're using DE&I for, that will be the first thing to go. But that's not what this is about. And that's fundamentally not the core of what we're trying to do.
I think there is a bit of weariness with D&I because it's still going to take 5 generations to get to it. So it's almost like we're spending this money, we're doing this stuff, but actually we're not shifting the dial. And so I really think we need to start thinking about equality and equity in different ways, because I completely agree. I think the D&I has connotations of tick box. So yes, we have these policies, great, job done. And it's not, as we've been talking about, it's actually how do we embrace the difference in men and women? How do we embrace the difference in how we think? How do we really change how we do business? And I think the more we can showcase, and this is where WUN comes in, actually I'm going to do a big punt for WUN, but the more we can showcase what good looks like and what an alternative looks like, because there are some brilliant businesses who are led by women. And actually what you often see is that when they're led by women, the whole leadership team or a majority of the leadership team is women. And we can sort of point to several of those in the utilities sector, and actually just demonstrating that different is not wrong, different is just different. I think the more we can do that, and again, picking up on your point around support, it's hard, it's lonely. If you're the only woman in a business, then actually where do you get your support from that feels like a female sort of nurturing piece? And that's where I think the power of network comes in. So I think the more we support each other, the more confidence we get collectively.
And does your point there highlight actually exactly what some of the challenges are? So when we can pick out a company where it's a female CEO and they have more women in the leadership team, is it because we're more likely to recruit people more like ourselves? I mean, if we see, it's what we would say to a male CEO and an all-male board, they've recruited people that they're comfortable with. Going back to that groupthink comment, you're more likely to get people in the room because of our need for consensus. So to change it, we need more women in senior positions to not only attract more women as role models, but they're more likely to, again, recruit. Do we think that's the case, or would you think women are operating more autonomously? Jill, I can see the cogs whirring in your head.
All the cogs are going. I don't know. I think women. It's like you go back to the thing that was in the papers recently about how when women see a job advert, they will only go for it if they fulfil all the criteria. But if men see a job advert, even if they only fulfil 6 of the criteria, they will still go for it. So I think, I think everybody is trying to do their best. And yes, I do think that women hopefully will employ women and, a huge diversity of everybody, really. But I think going back to culture a little bit, while we still see diversity and inclusion as something outside of the DNA of the business, rather than, it should be something that we're thinking about all the time. We should always be reflecting at the end of every day. Did we include enough women? Did we make sure that there was representation from all sorts of communities at the table? As long as it is something outside of the general day-to-day, vibe of the business, that's going to be difficult. It's a little bit like health and safety. If you consider that an add-on, it's always going to be difficult to keep people safe. So unless you embrace it and pull that into really the heart of the business and make diversity and inclusion really, the spine of everything, I think that's where the 5 generations comes in. We need to have a real behaviour change, culture change. We need to really challenge ourselves. I think everybody now in the workplace has to challenge themselves to be thinking like this, and it will feel forced. And I do get the impression sometimes that, everybody's worried about tokenism, and thinking, I must have a woman in the room. But it won't be tokenism if the thought is happening all the time in your brain. If you're always thinking, let's make sure there's the diversity in the room and diversity of thought, then it's not tokenism, is it? It's just inclusion. That's all it is.
I love that. And I think that maybe that is our first action in terms of recommendations to the businesses and the people listening to this, is that actually at the end of every meeting, when you're summarising and you're looking at the actions to take, is to have that moment of reflection. Was the meeting inclusive? Did everybody have a voice? Are we representing the people in our organisation? Are we representing the communities that we serve? And have those honest conversations, because then they may make different decisions on that basis, and that might help.
And also to hold each other accountable, because it's really difficult to have the hard conversation and say, oh, crikey, we were a totally male or a totally female panel. I mean, we're a totally female panel here. So that's really hard. But if we can move past the discomfort that we feel, and say, okay, there was something a little bit wrong, let's do it better next time. Let's just, have that reminder. Let's hold each other accountable. I think reflection and accountability is a huge part here.
I think, so just to build on that as well, I think you've really picked up something there, is that we have to get okay with feeling slightly uncomfortable about it. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to say something or to do something that's not fine. As I said, it's a learning experience. We're not perfect. I'm sitting here, I'm not perfect. I do things at times that aren't inclusive. We all do. And actually it's okay, as long as we have that thought and we move towards progress and towards betterment. And I think we ultimately, where we're all trying to get, is a true meritocracy, a true point where who you are, regardless of whatever situation, is what shines through. And we have to remember that in order to do that, we all have to start at the same starting line. You can't have someone starting 2 miles back and you at the starting line ready to go, right? So we all need to bring everyone in line to really let that happen.
So there is an element of psychological safety in all of it, I think. When you're building your culture in your company, as long as you really think about how to make it safe for everybody to have a voice and to say the difficult things, have the tricky conversations, call out when you might be the only voice in the room that goes against the tide. And, we spoke a little bit a minute ago about groupthink, and that is really dangerous, isn't it?
Probably one of my biggest learnings from last year, actually, in the work that WUN did, was around, actually, I think, going back to that sort of we think differently, I think we talk a lot about unconscious bias, but actually, if we change that and say we have blind spots, and I think, women have blind spots, men have blind spots. And the example from last year that I wanted to highlight was we hosted an executive dinner, which was very much focused on the new equalities legislation and bringing sort of senior execs up to speed on some of that. But the conversation, and I wasn't actually there, it's the fallout afterwards, but the conversation at that dinner, it really got down to brass tacks of what it feels like, what the lived experience is for women. And what really blew my mind was that actually the women in the room, and women I've spoken to since, went, yeah, well, that's how it is. I've had 2 conversations with 2 of the men in the room who basically said, I was absolutely blown away. And I'm now traumatised to the point where I went home to my wife and asked her, is that the lived experience at work? And she went, of course it is, that's it. And the chap I was talking to was one of the most, kind, generous, in favour of equalities people that you could possibly meet. But he suddenly went, oh my God, I just have missed it completely. And I think almost if we can acknowledge blind spots, and we all have them sat here today, if we can acknowledge that and get curious, I think that's the piece. What does it feel like? What is it? It's the soft stuff rather than we've got a policy. It's that actually, how do you feel about that? What have you experienced that's making you leave the sector or whatever? I think that's the piece, really getting curious.
But how interesting is it that when you talk about the soft stuff, but I think we've talked about it before, we've all had experience of women, I guess, at some point in our lives that have come in displaying, I don't know, traditionally female characteristics, but no, not necessarily female. And then somehow in their journey up to a senior level, they have changed their personality and they've started to take on characteristics that you would more readily associate with men. And you think you've lost the softness, the empathy a little bit. I think that's interesting, isn't it?
I think playing off that, and I've had some fantastic examples of brilliant leadership that I'd say more traditionally, as I said, like the less, I'm going to say, aggressive style of leadership, what could often be considered. And I think the fundamental difference is women who feel that they've had to take on the traditional culture in order to get to where they've got. And that means I've suffered, I've had to deal with all of these things, and so consequently you have to too. And I think in order to accelerate action, there's no way that as an attitude is going to work. And I know, I said I'm sitting with, people and teams who have been the exact opposite to me and know how much it's benefited my early career and will benefit my career to come. But actually a helping hand rather than an aggressive approach, I think will always win and always will get better results. And we need to think about that going forward and allow a culture and environment where that type of leadership is a given for me.
And I think that pressure to change, it's inward pressure. It's probably not external pressure. It's almost, if I'm going to succeed in this environment, I have got to fit in, become one of the boys. And if I'm honest, I'm going to give something positive because we can get very miserable here. If I look back to the beginning of my career, I felt that pressure far more just in how I was expected to behave, what good looked like, how I was assessed. And actually, as I've come through my career, maybe it's my confidence, maybe it's my just pig-headedness, but actually it does feel like women are now encouraged to be themselves far more than history. So I am more optimistic than I was.
Good.
Going back to the days when I was told that having babies was a hobby.
That's nice. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic because I think there are more role models around and more women leaders demonstrating femininity and values and not trying to act like pseudo men. Because I think that can be a real challenge for younger women, especially if they're seeing a very abrasive or aggressive nature. They think that to succeed, do I have to behave in that way? And then that's probably a challenge for them as an individual in terms of, am I going to compromise my values or how I want to operate in order to succeed? So I do think that has been a huge challenge, but I see less of it these days. And again, that goes back to the power of a network and community and working with a broader range of people that you get to see, that those are the minority. I'd also like to pick up on a conversation we had earlier as well about news stories. Negative media stories get really well sensationalised. And so you picking up on positive notes here, Jo, we do need to celebrate the huge successes around women in senior roles and helping support and grow the careers of women throughout their careers together, because there are some great successes and we probably need to change the thinking and landscape broader by communicating that so that the negative stories aren't surfacing to the top, because surely that's going to impact culture and thinking at all levels in an organisation.
It's really hard to, and you're completely right, it's really difficult to be positive when, some of the biggest media stories is we need more masculine energy in business and all of this, right? It's tough. It feels overwhelming. Those 2 points link together so beautifully because it comes back to that power of the network, what you surround yourself with, how do you engage with that positivity? And anyone who ever comes to speak to me at a WUN stand or a WUN event, I will say this in the strongest possible terms, is being a part of WUN from my early career was fundamentally transformational, purely based off of the network, the connections, and having that positivity around me. So when there's noise out there, when there's tough situations, which we all experience, I had the tools and the team to help me through it. And I think, how do we continue to amplify that so everyone can have a slice of that? Because I can't recommend it enough. Everyone needs a slice of WUN.
Okay, so I've got some questions for you each then. I think if we were going to ask the senior female and male leaders across the sector, each to do something different to help accelerate action, what would your ask be in terms of what they can do, what's within their gift in the workplace to do differently? And I've said female and male leaders as opposed to leaders because we've kind of acknowledged that culturally, physiologically, we're different. So actually we may need to do different things, but it could be one answer for both.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think I'm going to use the words again. Really get curious. And when I say get curious, I mean just go and ask people what it feels like to be working in the organisation. So as a leader, I think you've got to take responsibility for the culture of that organisation. You've got to actually recognise that change will not happen without you embracing it. And you've got to recognise you've got the blind spots. So I think for me, it's very much targeted at leaders to say it is not okay. You might feel it's great because actually you've created a culture that matches your way of working, but actually it might not be great for a lot of your workforce. So therefore get curious about what can change, what you can make change in order to create change. And I think that there is sometimes a complacency of I'm a good guy, I'm a good woman, I'm a good leader, but actually that's not great for the people working in your organisation. So it's like, how do you really help others feel comfortable?
So get curious.
Get curious.
Is Joe's action request.
I think fundamentally get curious is always going to be step number one. You have to understand the problem first. That's the thing. I think my build on that would then be to understand in a deep way the benefits to your organisation of moving the dial on this. Is understand how this can support your business, how it can help your clients, how it can help your customers, how it can really transform things for your business. It's a positive thing, and really get into the depths and understand and galvanise people around the fact that this is a really, really positive move and it's the right thing to do.
Mine probably comes after those two actions, and I think I would love to see all leaders amplify the voices from women in their organisations, celebrating them, and not just celebrating the big project wins or the big, framework wins, whatever it is, but really celebrating down at an individual level, internally and externally, and amplifying the voices of the women who are on the ground doing the work or in the office or in the back office, really amplifying those. And also, we talk about it a lot at the company that I work at, is lifting people up so they can stand on your shoulders. And so when you've got an address book that is full of really great people who might be able to offer some insight, or when you've had lots of experience that you might be able to share, is doing that with total generosity and not expecting anything from it, not as part of a project, not as part of anything, but really going all out to say, I've had a lifetime's experience, I've had a career's worth of experience, let me just share it, and you can take whatever you find most innovative, whatever you would like to take from it, take it freely, and although I guess, coming mid-career, not everything that I've achieved has been done easily. Not all of, there has been, not to be, and this is an Oscar-winning speech, but there's been sacrifice, and there's been times when you've gone without, or you've felt really rubbish for a long time, or been in a really awkward situation, and it's tempting to think, God, that was hard won on my part, but actually, there's no reason to make younger women or your peers, to make them hard win it as well. You can just give it freely. You can give your experience really easily. And it's just, I don't know, I know, Kerris, you said earlier that WUN had been really influential in your early career. I didn't come to utilities until 25 years into my career. I'd worked in the construction sector before then. And I came in and I just thought, my God, I am lost. I don't know what I'm doing. There's so many acronyms, so many things. I just don't understand. The concepts you're talking about are alien to me. To me, water just came out of a tap, or when you flush the toilet. I don't know all these things that you're talking about. And I'm really fortunate to have a network at my work who just gave their time, gave their experience really freely. But then another colleague of mine said, oh, look, there's this thing called WUN, and you can go on it and, find like-minded women. It is a revelation, the things that you can find just through a chat. It sounds so simple, and it can feel really daunting if you're not used to pushing yourself forward, and it can feel really awkward to go into a room or join a network and you think, I haven't got any mates with me, I don't know what to do, I'm going to walk in on my own. But, and this isn't preachy about WUN, but organisations like WUN are life-changing, because you can suddenly you can feel comfortable in your skin for the first time, since walking into your job, and think, actually, I'm not such a total thickie that I thought I was. And I don't look that different to everybody else, and I don't feel that different, and I'm as valid as the next person. And it doesn't matter that I haven't got the experience, because of the generosity of strangers who became colleagues, who became friends, who became family. You need your people around you. So leaders, be part of your employees' tribes. Allow yourself to get down on the ground and say, yeah, I can share this with you, I can share that with you. I think that's really critical.
Thank you.
Be generous.
Yeah, be generous. So we've got get curious, understand the commercial side of it, and help to
amplify and help and
elevate others.
I've got one more, but you can go first. You know me, I can't shut up.
We love it.
See, the one I was going to share is get out there. And this is based on a recent experience. So part of the exercise is for the leadership team to regularly get out there and walk around the community. And there's multiple purposes to that, in terms of health and safety and well-being, et cetera, As it was my first time doing this leadership walk, I was joined by one of my colleagues, which actually made the experience more pleasurable. So he joined me, and we just walked the various floors in the offices, talking to people, observing. People were curious as to why we were there, what we were doing, what we were watching. But it opened up all sorts of conversations in terms of things they liked and didn't like, the challenges. And when you go out there and get out there with no agenda, just to listen,
be curious,
observe, be curious, so much came out of it. You get the more of the heartbeat of the operation. So the conversation that you had with the man who'd come to the exec dinner, where he was saying, oh God, I didn't realise things that went on in my organization. I think if you get out there and you're listening, you will maybe hear some of those things, some of those challenges. That would be my sort of takeaway. If you want to accelerate action, get out there and listen to what's really happening.
I have a quick build on that, and then I'll hand over. But I think the other thing is get out there is such an important phrase for women to take on as well. Do shout about it. If you've done it, shout about it. Go out there, apply for that award, apply for that promotion, and go for it. Just back yourself.
I'm going to bring the tone down again now. So having got very much like that, I think the other one that, again, learning from everything we've done in WUN, we've got to be far less tolerant of poor behaviour. And I think one of the real learnings for the lived experience for women is that it's these, and we talk about, we've got badges for things now, microaggressions, but it's that sense of, if you walk into a room and there's joshing banter going on, and it's funny, and you can laugh with it, but actually if you're not part of that banter, you are immediately excluded. And so I think, and it's a real challenging one, because you don't want to be like the miserable one in the corner going, you can't talk about that because I don't know. But it's about how do you actually make sure that you don't tolerate the comment about somebody's skirt, or when the men are in the, you're in a room together and then you joke about something about a female. Don't accept it. Don't allow it to happen. And I think it's the same with women as well. If something is happening, you've got to call it out. You've got to call it out. You've got to report it, because otherwise we carry on in this sort of underworld of stuff that's going on that might not be visible, but actually is destroying confidence. Is sort of...
When I started at the job that I'm with now with Scoob, it was during lockdown. And so we were all at home, and it was a world that we didn't understand, and, all completely. And the company I worked for was spread remotely across the UK. So we come together now, but during that time we were all really remote from each other. So we'd get on the Teams calls literally all day. You'd be on Teams calls, and there is banter, and there were comments and things. And I just so happened to have a set of referee cards from my daughter playing football. Uh-huh. And when we had a team meeting, if someone said, and it became a joke in the end, but if someone said something that was off colour, and I just thought, I'm not having that. I'm just not having that. And I'd hold up a red or a yellow card, and it became a real touch point, and so they'd then try and get red and yellow cards, but actually
so powerful.
If you can call it out through humour enough times, then hopefully there won't be the need to report it or to do something serious but I think it's almost just saying, you've done this and it's a bit off colour, did you realise? Because a lot of the time people won't have done, and it's a slip of the tongue or a slip of the judgment. But
totally agree. And we've talked in the past about language and almost common language, and it's sort of icebreakers and how you engage with people when you walk in a room. And I always use the example, very often if men walk in the room, they'll start talking about football, and most of them don't actually care about the football or have a particular, but it's a common language. It gets you talking. Women will walk into a room and go, really love your dress, or where'd you get that? I'm looking at your nail varnish. Lovely nail varnish. And it's not actually in the nicest possible way. I don't care about your nail varnish, but it's a way of engaging, it's a way of talking. So it's about, how do you find a common language? One of the businesses I used to, I was the MD, and we'd used to have these team meetings, and a bit like your red and yellow card, came in and started to talk about football, and I just made a joke of it. Oh, it's boring, football again. Can we talk about something else? And then we sort of got onto a common, I think we talked about cycling, or we talked about weekends, or we talked about, and it just then brings everybody in. And you don't have to make, as you say, you don't have to make it into a big HR issue, but just calling it out with humour makes people think.
Mm. I think also as well is it's recognising the situation that you're in, is having that culture where that is a comfortable thing to do and that we're okay and we're all fine. Yeah. And equally as well, having those mechanisms where something really serious does happen, you know that you've got the backing and support of your organisation, because that's not behaviour that's tolerated. I think, everything from yellow cards, which I think is absolutely brilliant and genuinely so funny, all the way up to knowing that if something really serious does happen, that you're supported and you're going to be back to the hilt is so important. You mentioned psychological safety, but, psychological safety to be able to give someone a yellow card if they've said something not great, all the way up to knowing that you're protected at work.
And I think the phrase you said earlier in the conversation, Kerris, about being comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes, I think that's something leaders will need to be if they're going to challenge some of those behaviours, because it isn't always easy, is it, to say to somebody, I don't think you should have said that, or that wasn't
because actually it
inclusive.
got a laugh, and actually everybody in the room was laughing, and everybody was, actually it was funny, bluntly it was funny. But if you're the one in the room who is just slightly uncomfortable with it, or slightly in the firing line for it, then it's not okay.
No. So if accelerating action is about not going with the flow, not laughing at the inappropriate joke, but challenging it
in a good way,
in a
positive way,
that role models.
Yellow cards.
Male allies are so important to this, and I've seen it done. I've seen men do it really, really well, where they have not called somebody out, but called them in almost and said, okay, you're laughing, but actually that's quite serious, what you've said. That's not how we do it around here. I don't, that's not who we are. We're not doing it like that. But the confidence to call somebody out or to put your hand up, sometimes, or for me, maybe it's my generation, it has come with age. The woman that I am now is not the 19-year-old that first started at Atkins, who probably wouldn't have said boo to a goose, although old colleagues would probably, contradict that entirely. It's also being willing to stand up for other women, or stand up for other minority communities, if you like. You think, if you see something that's going wrong, let's have the confidence, even if it doesn't involve you, just have the confidence to check in on the person who was the victim in whatever sense, but also call it out keep the tiny. I'm sure that changing this from 5 generations before equality is going to come with little nuanced actions from everybody. It's not going to be big bra burnings, that type of thing. It's going to be little and all the time. Consistent change.
I think, and I say this being earlier in my career, I think about some of the things that I've tolerated in a workplace and some of the things that I would, and the level that I'd then tolerate in my personal life. And I'll tell you, I'm not consistent. And I would say this as someone who's fairly confident. I'll say, if I've got something else, I'll say it, and I'm bold. And still there's this thing, and you kind of, it's about creating that confidence. And actually, when that network is really strong and I have those people to support, that's when that creates that confidence and enables that culture to slowly change. It's just that slow build up, I want to say, from the bottom. We're talking about leadership, also has to come from the top. You've got to do a bit of both. But it's so important that we think about those small little dotted events to fill the gaps. You can't fill a jar with just big pebbles. You won't need sand in there too.
One other thing that I do want to say, we talked a lot about senior people opening up to younger in their career or younger age-wise. But I think I would also really encourage women who are, young in their career, to take every opportunity that they have to interact with senior level people. So, if you see an opportunity to be part of a discussion group or take part in reverse mentoring, it can be really terrifying to put yourself forward. But actually that person is looking to learn something as well, whether it's about themselves or about the world or about your experience. So, I think maybe what's coming from this is the whole be curious thing. Be really curious and be open to telling your story and being your authentic self, because I really do believe that everybody is trying to go in the same direction, even if it's at different speeds. So if there's an opportunity to be part of something within your organisation or within a network like WUN or wherever it is, just grasp it. You're not going to look silly. You're going to look like a strong woman, really.
Yeah, and that leads me on nicely to what is going to be my final question, which is on mentoring, because WUN obviously have a hugely successful mentoring programme, and it is aimed at anyone looking for mentoring support in their career. But the concept of reverse mentoring, I think, kind of highlights some of the things we've talked about. Be curious, understand the value to your organisation and giving back, getting out there, the kind of things that we talked about. If you were going to focus on mentoring, from an advice perspective to accelerate action, aside of now that I've mentioned reverse mentoring, or Gill mentioned it first, what else do you think organisations could do in that space? Because we know how powerful mentoring can be.
Again, it's that leadership piece. So, and I'm just building on a theme of reverse mentoring, but actually for leaders to sit down in a room with people from their business on an entirely informal basis, I think gives them the opportunity to show they're just human, and actually they're trying to do their best as well, and they are not perfect. And I think showing you're not perfect is quite a good thing. But more importantly, it gives you the opportunity to find out what life is like somewhere else in your career. And I think you've mentioned your children, and I mean my daughters, when I talk to them, they have a completely different perspective of life. And just because I'm old doesn't mean I know better. So I think it's very much about really listening and learning, because when we're in a world of AI, when we're in a world of different ways of working and different cultures, what we've all grown up with is not necessarily what's right for the next generation. So again, it's listen and learn and adapt.
I think also we're talking about AI, we need to watch how our new business practice and technology practices impact women and DE&I going forward. So it's absolutely a key call out. I think for me, it's the commit. Spend some time and spend some commitment in putting effort into these programs or doing these things. So I know I mentioned it earlier, but I'll take the example. So Hayley was my first ever boss when I joined as a fresh-faced graduate. And I will never forget, Hayley sat down, obviously running her own business, very busy, and sat down with me when I first joined utilities for 4 hours and went, "This is the industry. Here you go," and kind of literally walked me through a really, really kind of like that foundational. And I will never forget it, because it's the time that she spent and the time and energy that also, that's just one example, that she spent with me to develop my career and grow, honestly has shaped me into the person I am today and the consultant I am today. So let your people spend time with the people. You spend time with those people, put some commitment, put some energy, put some money, put some weight behind it, because I promise you it will develop your people in a way you could never do if you don't invest that time and that energy.
And I would say it doesn't just develop the people, it also develops you.
100%. Yeah.
You learn so much by being a mentor, by spending that time. Far more valuable than reading a ball paper.
Yeah. It's worth doing in every sense of the word. It's beneficial. Yeah.
I've literally just started mentoring myself, or being mentored by a member of the WUN board, and I'd almost forgotten how wonderful that opportunity is to, I mean, coming back after Christmas and you're, a little bit tired after the celebrations and all that, but coming back and having the chance to reflect on your life and reflect on what you want in the next part of your life and hearing of it. Mentoring is, well, I don't know, it is good medicine. It is really good medicine, I think, for all sorts of things. So I think, take that up when you've got the chance, but also I would, talk about what we want leaders to do in businesses, provide opportunities for their people to look outside the box, to the company that I work for, it works across both water and gas. So also I think looking into other industries, what we can learn from different places, that's really key as well. So I don't know, I just think allow curiosity, encourage make curiosity one of the things that you're, have you been curious? How curious were you this quarter? What have you learned? Come back and tell me about that. So when you're doing your appraisals or whatever it is, I think, curiosity could be like high on the agenda for what you've discussed. So but mentoring, everyone should mentor. Mentor all the time. Yes. I feel renewed.
Yeah. I also think, just picking up on that mentoring piece though, and also that the curious one, I think showing vulnerability is okay. And I think, again, the natural concept in work is you've got to appear to be, in charge and all over everything and always in control. And none of us are. I mean, completely not. And actually showing vulnerabilities and sharing that, be it in a private mentoring relationship or as a leader in a wider forum, I think really helps as well, because that just breaks down some of these. I've got to be just brilliant and I've got to behave like that, and actually life is a nightmare at the moment, and the reality is I'm terrified, and all those things. Actually, if you talk about them, it becomes a lot easier to address them.
I think we also can't accelerate action if we're not honest. There's no way we can get these things over the line if we're not realistic and honest. And that's, I think, what we've all got to live by. And that, unfortunately, means we're all very human at the end of the day. So
funny that.
Yeah.
We have a thing that we talk about where I work, and we've also, a client does it as well, talking about fantastic failures and how failure isn't a bad thing, but you have to learn from it. And I think that goes alongside mentoring quite a bit, working out what you've done, reflecting, thinking, okay, that wasn't right, that could have gone better, that went well, I should have done more of that. I think that's really critical. So yeah, fantastic failures is,
So much great advice. So much great advice and great conversation. So thank you all. And thanks to our listeners. I think the messages from here is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. And if you're genuinely passionate about accelerating action, then it is about doing things differently, and not a tick box exercise, not focusing on those very tangible outcomes, but focusing on the intangible ones, the culture, the people, the atmosphere, and what you are doing day in, day out to live the values that make it a more inclusive place to work. Thank you for listening and for watching. And if you want to find out more about the Women's Utilities Network, join us online at thewun.co.uk. You can follow us on LinkedIn, and you can pick up all of our podcasts via Spotify and all other channels.